right, 6:32 p.m., Monday, January 8th. I'll call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Start with our regular three announcements. So this meeting is being recorded by Cape Ann TV Access Corporation for future broadcast. Meeting is being filmed by volunteers from Cape Ann TV. Meeting is being taped by Board of Selectmen Secretary Debbie Morong for accuracy in minutes. Anyone else who is recording the meeting is asked to notify the chair at this time. And lastly, if everybody could please silence or turn off their cell phones at this time, it will be appreciated. I think a couple of quick announcements. One, the ice in the harbor is thin and quite hazardous. Please do not walk on it. You will probably die. Our police and fire department will try their best to save you, but please don't walk on it. And we'd like to put out a little thanks to our DPW workers and other town workers who worked through Christmas during the storm and gave us nice clear roads the very next day, or even on Christmas Day proper. Now, item 0 on the agenda. Does anybody have anything that is not on tonight's agenda that they want to make a comment about? Okay. So, first up is Mr. Heisey, the Veteran Honor Roll, letter of recommendation. Have a microphone, and whoever would like to talk for you, introduce yourself and give us your plan.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Selectmen, Select Ladies. I'm Paul Sullivan. He's Bruce Heisey. And we're here to talk about tonight the Veterans Honor Roll. Before doing that, however, we would like to take the occasion to be the first at a Selectmen's meeting to wish all of you a very happy, healthy, successful, most importantly, prosperous new year.
Appreciate it.
Is that said with enough feeling?
Really, yes.
Okay. The nature of our business before you tonight is it appears that our project, and when I say our project, being inclusive here, to include you, because it was the Board of Selectmen who approached Bruce and I to head up a project, look at the town green in the common, to review the status of the Veterans Honor Roll on the common, and to come forth with recommendations. We were individually approached by Dan Senecal. That was shortly after the Civil War, and then following that individual meetings, we agreed to appear in front of the Selectmen's group, and we talked about the project and what we were willing to do and what the Selectmen would like to see. And we agreed to do it and went forth. And we hired, or I should say, we never didn't hire anybody. We persuaded architects, designers, construction people, Cricket, to pro bono us with their skill sets in bringing forth the substance of a new honor roll. We reviewed both the town green, we looked at the parks, we looked at the cemeteries, we looked at school properties, we looked at Singing Beach as alternative sites to place an appropriate honor roll, and ultimately decided on the existing town common, where there is an existing honor roll that was erected in the early 1930s for Civil War veterans who came from this town. There's over 100 of them, and it's on a rock and it's on a bronze plate. All of their names are on it. exists on the town green. And we determined that this would be the most appropriate place, since it is by far the most heavily gathered location in town, where most people come, particularly Manchester citizens. We had to get the approval of three bodies. There was the Selectmen, there was a Conservation Committee, and there was the Historical District. We secured the approval of all three. We then initiated the project. By initiated, I mean that the first thing we had to do was raise money. Our estimated cost of this project was anywhere from $185,000 to $200,000. That was a professional estimate. That's not grab it out of the sky kind of projecting. That was a professional estimate done by Windover Construction. Lee Deliker and his gang, who used to be headquartered across the street here, who volunteered their services to provide a project manager, do the estimating, and oversee the project pro bono. Okay. So we initiated the project by going out to raise money. And we were successful in raising over $100,000. The town was generous enough through the CPA to further add to the pot of $50,000. There has always been the stipulation agreed to by Bruce and I, as well as the body of selectmen, that nothing would be initiated until the money was raised. Because we all know what happens when things are initiated and only 60% of the monies exist in the coffers. In this case, we'd be here on bended knee, saying, don't throw us in jail. In any event, what happened is that the time clock, according to the historical district, ran out. There's a stipulation that projects must be initiated within a certain set time frame. It used to be 2.5 years, but after the recession, which initiated at the end of 2000, which started the end of 2008 and ran through 2012, 2013, what happened is that the state determined an extension of 4 years in play, because they recognize that town budgets, city budgets, projects such as ours, we're going to have difficulty gathering the monies needed to complete the job. Well, that time clock has now expired, and according to the historical district, and we still have the question in our mind, but neither one of us are lawyers, is what does it mean to start a project? Someone may argue that you start a project when the first shovel hits the ground. That's the initiation of a project. Others may maintain, well, in our case, we think we can make a good case is that the project started when we got clearance from the three bodies, Selectmen, Conservation, Historical, that to go on out and raise the money. That the money was the first thing that needed to be accomplished, and we agreed that we wouldn't do anything until all of the money was raised. That's an argument for a lawyer. At this point, we are planning to go ahead, and we've been summoned to appear in front of the historical district. I think we're scheduled, it's not scheduled and posted yet. It'll probably be up, we're looking at the end of the month, but certainly by the conclusion of February. In any event, the reason we're here is that going back on the history, it was the Board of Selectmen, as then composed, who initiated the project. It's not the Legion, it's not Bruce and I. The Board of Selectmen sought us out, and we were happy to provide our services. Now, in our reappearance as deemed necessary by the historical district, we would request that the Board of Selectmen provide us with a letter stating, in effect, that they support this project and they support all the elements of the project as the board has approved the project and there are no additional changes to be made in this project. Plans are the plans. They're the original plans. Everything is the same. The only thing that has changed from the beginning in 2007 or so is the composition of this board, the composition of the other two boards that apply to the approval process. But nothing from our end has changed at all. Now, you may very well ask, why should we give them a letter? Let them go in front of the Conservation Commission and let's see what happens. Okay. There are two outcomes that can happen in front of the Conservation Commission. Thumbs up,
You don't have to go
thumbs
before
down.
Historic District Commission.
Oh, I'm sorry. Conservation, they love us. We're far enough away from the waterfront over here. Excuse me. I mangled my words. I will get strategery right, though. At any rate, in going in front of the Historic District, we get a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Now, we don't think we will get a thumbs down, simply because the precedent has already been set, and there are no changes. If the plans were been significantly modified, then okay, there's something to debate. So the reason in coming in front of you is quite simple. I'm an old political player. I like leverage. And when I can apply leverage, Bruce and I, or anyone can apply leverage in their favor to argue a point, you're pretty foolish if you don't ask for it. So it's quite simple. We would like to have a signed letter from the board supporting the project, the caveats that existed with the first letter that you supported us because it's proved, it's in the notes. And we will certainly use that to whatever advantage we can in assuring or boosting the, let's just say, the probability that the Historic District will reach a favorable finding.
Okay.
So that's the nuts and bolts. We'll answer whatever questions that you have for us, and then we'll adjourn. You guys can carry on real business.
Okay, well, why don't we have a little chat among ourselves here? And personally, I don't see that anything has particularly changed in the specifications, and nothing has really changed in the outlook of the town on this particular project. So I'm personally not opposed to such a letter. What
So
do you
this
think?
project is the one that you had the plywood mock-up done out on the town common for 2 months at one
Yeah, there was
point.
a markup done.
Yep,
There was
yep.
Certainly public meetings here,
Yep,
open
and-
meeting. There was an open meeting at the Legion that we solicited, that the cricket well publicized. That was held at, there had to be, there was standing out the door, so let's just say 200 people there in round numbers.
It was a long process. It was very well
We put
vetted.
on a slideshow presentation. It was a very, very, professional presentation. All of the plans that we have submitted to all of the bodies, although some have been so-called, let's just say, sketches and drawings, they were done to scale. So this wasn't fantasy or a pipe dream of what it's going to look like. This is a rendering of what it will look like in all of its various capacities, and the renderings were three-dimensional. There had to be at least, 8 different renderings taking into aspect all different views, no matter where you were standing. And as you folks are well aware, it's to be positioned in front of basically the police station and flyover.
Yeah, it seems to me that, you've gathered information, you put the plans out, you let people come and ask you questions about it. It's gone through three groups at the present moment. The only thing that wasn't there is that, you guys aren't professional fundraisers. And I don't mean that negatively, I just mean the raising the $180,000 is the hard part, getting the plans done. So, I mean, just to let that, which is the only delay you've had in the project, get in the way of the project, to me, makes no sense at all. So I would be in favor of the board supporting your request.
Thank you. And can I just add, Tom, in response to that, we're on the cusp of having the amount of money.
Yeah.
We are negotiating with let's just say a personal guarantor, okay? Now, that means someone has stepped forward and said that they are willing to stand behind whatever, quote-unquote, reasonable shortfall you may have. However, as I've had my own name on many, many contracts, nothing is valid until the signatures appear and documents are in writing. And we accept that and we recognize that. But certainly, this group here can certainly go a long way toward helping us. Again, without quibbling on words, it's all about leverage. And, I'm not gonna say otherwise. It ain't pretty, but we're trying to get something done that will have a favorable impact on this town. And obviously, from what we've heard, the people we've talked to, we're certainly heading in the right direction.
Okay, so I'd like to give the other board members an opportunity to comment.
I'm fully in support of all the work that's been done and all the work that will be done. Me too.
All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll write a letter for you.
Should you make a motion?
Yeah,
Sure.
I'll make a motion to write a letter in support of the Manchester Honor Roll as outlined by Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Heisey today, to go to the Historic Commission to indicate our support by the Board of Selectmen.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we'll do your letter for you, we'll get it out well in advance of your potential meeting.
If you can
Thank you very much,
If you can let
Mr.
us
Chairman.
know when your evening is, I know that some of us will be glad to be there.
Thank you, thank you very much. We appreciate your time, and we know it's time to exit.
And we won't be back here again asking for more permission. In this one, it will get done.
Thank you for
Thanks.
your time.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much.
All right. Is anybody here for the Comcast contract, which is number 2 on our agenda? Nope. All right, I'm gonna move that down, and we're gonna move to item 3, Downtown Improvement Project Committee, since you guys are here. So we have 4 things in your purview that we're talking about tonight. One is an electronic sign proposal. The other is a request to create a walkway from Town Hall parking lot to downtown area. Third is a request for one-way traffic on C Street and Tappan Street. And the fourth is a short discussion about a proposal for some brick sidewalks. So we can take them in order.
There's some hands out on the sign coming across.
So So why don't we start with the sign? Pick whichever color microphone you want.
We'll put a microphone there in her honor.
Okay, Chris, go
So,
ahead.
good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Chris Shea, 50 Bridge Street, also on the Downtown Improvement Committee, but item number one is actually an item proposed by the Manchester Essex Rotary Club, and it falls within the purview of the Downtown Improvement Committee, obviously in the downtown area. But we're proposing to donate to the town, to purchase, install, and donate an outdoor digital message center somewhere where you would determine on the town green, so that you can communicate with the town regarding snow emergencies, town meetings, board meetings, festivals, and so forth. The letter that you have, there's a couple of mock-ups, a couple of potential designs. We have Carpenter and McNeil Architects doing the design work on it. I have Manchester Electric, quote for them to do the electrical installation if you approve this. And let's see. After we would donate this, we would ask you to take over the maintenance of the item. Again, so the location is somewhere in the town green. Andy and I went over and looked, and we thought perhaps over, if you did something underneath the pine tree off to the side, people could see it coming down School Street, they could see it walking along Central Street. I have spoken to Town Administrator, Mr. Federspiel, and also to Sue Brown. They both were very happy about this. I've talked to a couple of you individually. The letter that you have here was a letter that I put together for the district Rotary. And we applied for a district grant, and we were having an approval to match up to $3,000 of our expenses to do this. So we think the project would come in somewhere around the $7,000 or $8,000 range, of which they would pick up about $5,000. So I don't want to take up any more of your time, because we do have a couple more items on the agenda. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, so the Rotary Club proper would be doing the oversight, seeing the construction of the project?
Yes.
Okay.
With your approval, of course.
Yeah, and you've given us two options for views. Who would make the final decision on, and when would the final decision be made on the form of this thing?
We would come to you for the approval on that.
Okay. The dates are probably a little off in here. It says you plan to purchase and complete the installation by the end of October 2017. I
Right.
suspect
The
you mean
project
2018.
has to be completed by the end of June of 2018. This was submitted
Right.
back in the summer. And this is, I think I first spoke with the town manager about that time. We thought it was a good idea, and as things happen, they proceed at somewhat of a snail's pace at times, but that's
Yep.
okay. Anyway, I think first and foremost, you like the idea, and, obviously the cost would be nothing to you, so.
Yeah, so we've had a number of times when we've put a message board out there to notify people of things. I think my only concern, my small concern I had initially was if we 24/7 have an LED sign running out in the front. That's a change to the way the town common looks. So I might have feelings about whether or not it's running all the time 24/7, but I think that's really my only concern about it. Other than that, I like the idea, because it gives us a good vehicle for communicating.
You'd have the ability to turn it off whenever you want. You
Yeah,
can have it on a
sure.
timer. And that sort of thing.
And easily reprogrammed, I assume, from inside the building. So, comments from board since we last talked about this? Grab a microphone.
Andy Harris, 26 Tappan Street. You could have the sign have different levels of illumination. So in the evening, just have it at a very low level, and then put it up higher. So it's quiet. It's there, but it's sort of like having a Christmas tree. It's there, and it's actually, the location we're looking at would be where the dog and his owner sit. And so it's
That's referred to as the Ed Gavin bench.
So I have no doubt really that from a technical standpoint, we can resolve this particular issue. I really only raised it to point out that I think that when it comes time, if we approve this, we should have some thought around that. That's all.
I think the offer is wonderful. It's going to give us another way to communicate with people, and we always talk about, all of a sudden when something changes, like we're extending the blue lights for an extra 24 hours, that's just another way to communicate out to people that way. And the whole idea that you think that nonprofits can use this to advertise some of the, like the Festival by the Sea through the chamber and things like that, or different activities happening in town, like the pancake breakfast, or, it's going to reach a lot of people in town.
I agree. I appreciate the thought from the Rotary.
I agree. Great idea, it's very general. I guess my two questions are, 3 feet by 6 feet, is that readable by car passengers, or is that intended for pedestrians?
No, I
Seems
think
small for
there would
someone to
be
drive by.
up to 5 lines of text on that. So the text, if you could divide 3 feet by 5, the messages would be roughly 8 or 9 inches high, each line, something like that. So I think if you, and these are, again, but obviously discussions have been about the change, putting a digital message on the old town green here. That's and we have to go to the historic commission as well. So we'll see what happens there.
I
But
just know you're sitting next to someone on the
Yeah.
bike ped committee who I'm wondering whether or not there's a belief that people driving should really be looking at a message board.
what? Yeah.
Doesn't matter how fast you're going, you shouldn't be looking at a sign if you're
Right.
driving.
Well, but if you're coming down School Street, you're supposed to be coming to a stop, and then you could read the sign.
Well, that was my other question.
So it
is
may
the-
help
is
that.
the location of it. So I love the idea, and I think it's very generous that the funding is available. The question is, where is the optimal place, and is the town green really the best place for this? And were other options looked at, maybe down some sort of town available property or placement down near Crosby's or around the post office type of thing, where you're still getting a lot of foot traffic, you're still getting a lot of car volume, disseminating information is still very viable there. If anything, maybe even more than the town green because of the railroad commuting traffic. There's a side of me that thinks the town green is quite nice because it doesn't have a lot, and now we start adding things, particularly lighted boards. In trying to do a great thing, or are we inadvertently doing something in the long-term interest of the town that isn't actually beneficial as much as the information is? Or is there a cheaper, less fashionable option at the entrance points into town, thinking that people that are from town are still gonna leave to go commute and do shopping and come back in, and, is that, whether Pine Street and School Street are those places where we would actually put message boards? And lighting wouldn't necessarily be as much of a concern. Just 2 thoughts.
No, very valid points. Someone had suggested by the school, that might be an option, but as they had mentioned, the town green is the focal point of the town, and
Yeah.
if it can be off to the side where it is not really, not directly in front of the town hall, that would be an option. I think that's town property, is it not? Where the bench is and.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
I would think from the placement perspective, and particularly with the conversation we just had about the honor roll, that the historic commission can maybe look at that and give some guidance around look and feel for the front end of it, just so that we don't lose some of the concerns that you may have. But I wish we could have kind of both, because I think coming into town off of 128 and having that opportunity to get messages up for people is a nice thing to do. But I'm happy to start here, and thank you very much for the piece of that. But I would definitely defer to the historic commission to make sure from the look and feel that both look right and seem to fit appropriately.
that's very important to me as well.
Thank you, Mr. Shea.
So,
Next is the wanting to be able to connect to the railroad station from the town hall.
right. So the issue when we originally looked at this, and we've all of us, I think, have wanted to do this for a very long time, and the issue that when we last looked at it was, well, at one point, the owner of the property simply said no, and then I think more recently, the owner of the property has indicated they would be willing to do it if we could satisfy liability insurance requirements. And Greg looked into this, and Greg, could you give a brief summary of where we stand on that?
So the simple answer is yes, that it can be covered by the town's liability insurance. The requirement would be to have a defined walkway, so that it would be a defined path. But given that, then it could be added to our general liability, just like a sidewalk.
So, this is a very interesting opportunity. I think we've wanted to open up that potential pathway for a very long time. So, what do other members of the board think?
Oh, I definitely agree. It's been talked about for years and years, and if the current property owner is showing any interest at all, it needs to be pursued.
I agree with Ms. Driscoll.
It's been more than 20 years.
Yeah, so I think we'd certainly like to move forward on that. The question is, I guess that's something that we would drive from the administration down at this point. Is that right?
Yes, and I would see working with a couple members of the DIP and working out the logistics with the impacted landowner or landowners and go from there.
Yep.
I would, again, just add the caveat, the design piece of that in concert with the conversation we're having about the sidewalks would be nice to think of it as a consistent, we're trying to get that look and feel of a walking community so things look consistent.
Yep.
So I would, making sure that whatever we do there, looks consistent with the town character and what we're trying to do.
And if it isn't too expensive or timely, it would be nice to get some sort of a concept of what would be the additional efforts done to create a continuous look and feel all the way to town hall, even though it's beyond the sidewalk. How would the pathway then blend into,
Right.
you know, aesthetically joining to town hall? You know, are there things that we would do to the edging of the parking lot, some planters or something like that, so that you really had a continuous aesthetic feel?
There are some drawings that were done at the beginning of the DIP project. We can burrow through the
It'd be
drawings.
interesting. It's great. I will confess, 40 years ago, when I was a 7-year-old jumping over the fence. So,
I think
long
several
ago,
of
I
us
think it
used to
should
do
have
that.
happened.
I can remember when there were no fences and
Okay.
there were
so
steam engines.
So I think we're all in favor here of driving
Yeah.
forward on that as efficiently as we can. So your third request was for one-way traffic on C Street and Tappan Street. And I'm
Right.
going to note that that was part of one of the Complete Streets
Right.
assessments. And
This would not be done as complete streets because the sewage line on Beach Street has to be worked on. So this would be the traffic pattern of complete streets without repaving the street.
So one of the things that we were looking for out of the Complete Streets project, and some of the things that they were talking about, gave rise to the feeling that we needed to have a more complete traffic study in town before we started making significant changes to traffic directions. And I think that it would be appropriate before we made changes along these lines, which are comparatively, but potentially quite major, that we go through that larger process. Otherwise, we can get ourselves into something of a whack-a-mole process for doing traffic planning in town, which we have had some experience with in the past year or so, which is, well, left some singed feathers. So I think it would be a good idea for us to drive this through the larger process of looking at the Complete Streets project.
And the other thing that I would say on that is that I believe having Tappan Street two-way works when the center of town is very busy to allow people to avoid and continuing to crowd into the center of town as they go out, you know, go from Beach to Tappan to C Street and then proceed where they're going rather than just adding an extra whatever the number of the cars is that winds up there. So I would be in favor of an overall, a 60,000-foot view of what it looks like. And from what I see from Sue Brown's monthly report, the intersection at Washington, Summer, and C Street is one of the projects that Mass DOT may be funding, but nothing beyond that, just that intersection.
What I would ask of you is that you go and walk that route and see what kind of traffic you're putting across what is really a village street. You make it into a street where some people will go one way at 40 miles an hour. And you go.
Nobody can go 40 miles an hour around there right now. They go 20 by the law, right?
They go by law. Now, how often do people obey that?
Yeah, okay. I don't want to belabor that point, I guess.
No. The other direction is unsafe. And so what you're saying is keep an unsafe condition in anticipation of something that may not happen for quite a while.
You know, that's kind of stuffing words into my mouth that I don't quite appreciate.
Well, I mean, I do appreciate, or I don't appreciate the many trucks that go through and are saving time by going through and going up to a blind crossing, going up to Summer Street is the wrong way to have that street operate.
I think we should also have public safety weigh in.
So can I just jump, so one of the things that we're doing as we're coming to the end of the master plan, there's a segment on transportation. And the other issue is too up at Bennett Street off of Pine, which is very narrow. area. People have requested that to become a one-way. Rather than waiting for an endless period of time for this to be decided and deliberated, I think one of the recommendations that we should have is asking Master Plan and Sue Brown to say there's a couple of hot spots that we're looking at right away. This one, as well as the one up off of Pine, Bennett Street. Where are other areas that we have that we know we need to look at a traffic study? And let's get that going and put forward so that we can bring this to some conclusion with some data. So I would suggest that we take that and whatever other ones that we have. Greg, I don't know if there's any, I know Bennett Street's one of them. We talked about putting a roundabout up there or whatever. Let's get the sort of center of the town and the streets and the transportation piece as a priority for the master plan deliverables to say, here's the path to get these decided. Because I think the frustration comes is these can get kicked down the road a lot and there doesn't seem to be any decisions made. So I'd rather take it, make a good decision, understand the impacts, but have it done in a timely manner. So I think that's what I would recommend doing at this point.
I
Yes.
agree with Susan.
All right. So we will put this on the list of things to revisit with the master planning committee and the other committees and see if we can get to a conclusion on it as efficiently as we can.
Okay.
Last item we had tonight was proposal regarding brick sidewalks. We had a developer who's proposing that on Central Street around 7 Central and some of the other buildings there, that we take a goodly length of that sidewalk and replace it with, or put in brick pavers. And I believe the DPW has been doing work to specify the type of technical work that would need to be done in order to make that supportable from a maintenance standpoint and from an ADA compliance standpoint. And when we discussed this at a recent meeting, we had a couple of concerns. One was, will we be creating a patchwork of different look and feels for the town? Will we then be opening this doorway for us to be put in a position where it's sort of expected or wondered if we're going to be propagating that throughout the rest of the downtown area, which would be rather expensive. So we wanted the Downtown Improvement Project to committee to weigh in on this concept and this direction. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity already as a committee to talk about it.
At some length.
And what were the conclusions of the committee?
The conclusion was that bricks are the wrong size unit. That to have a stable sidewalk, the elements need to be bigger than a brick. And there are several places where nothing really should be done. For instance, the bridge, which is in trouble behind Seaside 1, that needs to be figured out and fixed so that we can have compliant and maintainable elements. And the place where they really wanted to do bricks is before that. And really, what needs to be figured out is everything from the end of section 1 of the dip, so right in front of the Brown's new store, all the way to Pine Street. Have all of the elements. So you've got Washington Street, you've got School Street, you've got whatever, I've forgotten the name behind.
Elm Street,
Right, Elm.
Morse Court.
Yeah, although everything needs to be figured out the whole length before anything is committed.
So, um, so is there a feeling in the Downtown Improvement Project Committee that a paver solution that's thought out across that area would be a reasonable thing, or?
Well, pavers, yes, but not with large elements. And it has to meet all of the requirements, the ADA,
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. I know that, the original charge of the committee was to continue the downtown improvement into phase number 2 or project 2. And, I'm wondering if we go ahead and give this particular landowner, or even if we work on those sidewalks and get them all set, whether it be from one end to the other, all of a sudden, if the project were to be funded or someone were to, get a huge grant, would we liable to have to tear up some of those sidewalks that are already in place?
not if you do it the right way. You've got to, you do need to go the whole length.
And it should be,
Give Gar the mic, if you would, please, just to, yeah.
Gar, Morse, 11 Jersey Lane. It's my feeling that to do the type of paving that's being thought about here is very expensive. It's a lot more expensive than concrete sidewalks, asphalt sidewalks, etc. We do paving in office buildings and shopping centers in my business. And having paving from, 4 Beach, as the new store is called, all the way, down to the Phillips 66 or whatever it's called now, that's a lot of money. And for us to take and bite off a little section in front of Floyd's and put brick pavers, that might look cute in front of Floyd's, but I can't imagine that this municipality and its budget would be able to encompass that type of treatment all the way over that distance. It's just, I'm not as sanguine about this prospect. I'm not against bricks, but in this particular instance, I think it's overreach for that long area.
So, I guess there's a couple of ways to look at it. One is, well, certainly not in the near term, or not in any of the budgeting that we have in the near term, would we be extending a project like that out to the scope that you're talking about. But you appear to have a recommendation that that's the scope that it should in the long term be. The question is, setting that aside, if the owner of those properties still wish to move forward with putting in some pavers in front of the stores that they own, would you be in support of them doing that? If would you want to make recommendations with respect to the materials and design being used? Or would you simply oppose it from the standpoint of it not being appropriate for the area?
Well, one of the things that we've been charged with is looking at the intersections themselves. And we find that the school Central Union Street intersection is a disaster waiting to happen. With the stop signs where you can't see anything and all these sorts of things. So one of the and that's obviously part of the Complete Streets program, and the planning is going out on that. I have personally talked to Sue about looking at that intersection a little differently, and creating a much broader sidewalk there, so that the streets would come together almost perpendicular, the stops and the crosswalks right there. So before anybody, I mean, we do have a couple of people that are willing at some point to donate money to participate in the project. So we shouldn't, we don't want to kick the gift horse in the mouth, so to speak, but we want to have it be part of the overall project. And I think this is my position on this, that intersection, and we've talked ad nauseum about the Pine Street, Central Street, Bridge Street intersection, and it was a year and a half ago, we passed a motion to try to get a temporary situation there, actually a roundabout situation, a temporary one that we could try to see if it would work. Because that's another, and you alluded to the Bennett Street entry there. So, and my point is that we don't want to have this developer be going out and doing all this work, which is going to be torn up almost instantaneous, well, at some point right after
Right.
that. So, I don't know if that makes sense.
You can't really do it. It's the town sidewalk. So,
Well, they're asking, they want to do it, I believe they want to fund the work that, for doing it, they'll do it according to our specifications. The question is whether or not it just creates more problems in the long run. That's, I think, the thing that we're trying to address.
You know, when you did the DIP one, you had, none of it was funded by the town, from what Andy tells me. Donations and grants, that was it. So we very much like to have these developers be part of that process. I think it's our job to come up with a plan for that. With that, I will pass the mic.
So we might support it, but it would be better to bring them in and integrate them with some of the larger.
So my point is, if you take the space from the gas station down to 4 Beach, and look at that recommendation for the Bridge Street, Pine Street, the School Street, Central, all that, and come up with a comprehensive plan that says, here's how we would like this to look eventually. Even if it is brick pavers or whatever it might be, there could be a way to integrate and say, for this part of town, we could use this, but it will look consistent because we'll use these materials in this way, so that it looks like a flow and it works. So I agree with Gar, I don't think we want to spend $1 gazillion redoing the whole town in brick pavers. However, there are some nice aesthetics that can be drawn for the center and around Town Hall that can be done, but as long as it's in concert with a larger plan. And so I would say that the Downtown Improvement Committee should go forward with figuring that plan out, help out our person here who's interested in doing something, perhaps being part of it, and we can do what we did for DIP 1, which is raise money and find ways to create that to happen. And it could coincide with this traffic study we're doing, so that we're really looking at things in a very holistic manner. That would be my thought.
Yep.
we invite all of you to come tomorrow morning from 8 to 9:30 when the DIP committee will be meeting in this room to discuss these things that we're talking about.
Good.
Okay, so we'll get DIP going with,
Okay.
Thank you.
so, Greg, I think that leaves you and I and the DIP to talk a little bit maybe with that developer to see if we can get them to do a cooperative planning on this.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, I think that's all we had for the Downtown Improvement Committee for tonight. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item number 2, the Comcast contract. Greg?
So the last item that was holding us up was this, basically a side letter that is more explicit about how new services are extended to neighborhoods. And so before you is a revised version of that letter that lays out the process and the communication pieces, which is something that I think was missing and has been frustrating to some residents. And even though it doesn't go as far as I think some residents would like, legal counsel feels this is probably the best we are going to get, and he feels that we've done well to get this. So this spells out the process about how a resident can ask for a service to be extended, and some timelines, and the transparency that Comcast is supposed to be held to in terms of sharing those pieces of information with the residents in their request.
So the part that I couldn't see for sure if it was present was how the resident can predict what those costs are going to be and how they're broken out. Is that, that's the,
So the letter doesn't provide the calculus
yeah,
for that. It is a case-by-case analysis in terms of what kind of material they're digging through, if it's an underground line in particular. But there is a commitment from Comcast to share those details with the resident, which is something we did not have before.
Well, and it says
Right.
here, if the extension in question does not meet the license required, a letter is sent to the resident who made the initial, that includes the total estimated cost, the contribution per home
Right.
that the company would make towards the cost, and the contribution per homeowner. So I think it does detail it on the second page.
close enough.
Right, it doesn't go so far as give us a per-foot
No,
cost or something like
But it gives you
that.
a
But
process,
it
which
gives
is
you a
what they were
process.
asking for.
Yes.
Which I think is very realistic. That's good.
So I think that's the improvement that we
Yeah.
have here.
And I think that sounds good.
So other than that, the rest of the contract is as I have reported earlier in terms of, there is a change in how much money is collected for Cape Ann TV as the public access station. There are dollars for us to install our own fiber loop connecting town and school buildings, and then a commitment from Comcast to make sure that the feedback to Cape Ann TV is a fiber line as well. So that helps in our efforts. And then the technology fund piece is continued to be funded. That allows us to make improvements to updates to microphones and speakers and that sort of thing, cameras for our public meetings. So if we want to develop a similar setup in the other room, we could do that as well.
Is that fiber loop, just out of curiosity, is that going on the poles or underground? Or do we know that at all?
I don't recall that detail. I think it's underground, but I'll have to double check.
Underground would be ideal. Okay.
I'm pretty sure in the village area where things are underground already, it would be underground. Whether they go back up on poles where everything else is on poles, I have to double check.
Okay. All right, so,
I think it depends on the street.
Right.
so you'd be looking for a vote from us to approve, to allow you to execute the contract with Comcast.
Right, so yes, you actually signed the contract. You have signed the signature page, but we need you to formally vote that.
Yeah.
So yes.
All right, comments, questions from the board?
Appreciate your extra overtime work on this.
Taking a little while, but I think we're
Yeah.
there.
It's very good. I'm actually thrilled that we got it as well as we did.
Okay, well then, can I get a motion to approve the Comcast contract? as
Make
we
a
have-
motion that we approve signing the contract between Comcast and the town of Manchester by the Sea for a 10-year period of time.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you. It's nice to check this one off.
One big thing off the to-do list.
Nice to get this one done.
All right, item 4 on the agenda, Manchester's 375th anniversary celebration, which is coming up in, what, 2020? Which seems like a long ways away, but it is not, because in order to do a reasonable job of a celebration, there needs to be planning and fundraising. So Tom Kehoe had suggested that we start thinking about that now, maybe put together a committee and get the ball rolling on that. Discussion.
Yeah, so my thoughts were that, if we could all come up with a couple of people that we think might be good people to sit on a committee or to do this. I mean, we'd have to offer it to the entire town, which would be correct to do, but if we could seed that committee with some people who we know might be interested in the history of the town or our planners. You need to get kind of specific people for this, because if you're going to do something that's of any size, you not only have to think about planning the celebration, but also budgeting for the celebration. So it's been 23 years since we had the 350th, which was significantly large. And I'm not saying the 375th has to try to beat that, but people will look for some type of a celebration other than just 2 extra bands in the 4th of July parade.
Who was on the 350th?
Dan Senecal was the
Chairman.
head honcho, yeah, he pushed that. I mean, I hate to say it, if you look at the list of people who are on the 350th, I bet you half of them aren't with us anymore. So,
So,
I mean, my idea of just putting this out here is for people to start thinking about it, people to, discuss it. Maybe people have a particular person that they could, speak to, or,
Well, so Greg, at this point, does it make sense to just announce that we're forming a 375th anniversary committee, and through the pages of the Cricket and the blog and everywhere else, put the word out for volunteers as well as speaking to people?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would do both,
Yeah,
yes.
I would give some guidance for the functional roles that need to be filled, because I think you obviously want volunteerism to take root, but you also want to keep an eye towards some specific expertise.
oh, absolutely, but
I think it'd be good to spell it out, like we're looking, we're
I think
forming
once
committee, and we're
people
looking for these.
realize that we've put it out there, I think there'll be a few that might want to jump right in.
I think it'd be good to talk to Dan, just to
Yeah.
get the sort of
Just-
roadmap
yeah.
from what they did for the 350th. I'm happy to call him and ask him,
Yeah,
just, get an
What went
idea.
well, what didn't go well.
Yeah,
What was
So-
missing.
not
Also-
much was missing, I can tell you that, not much was missing.
so I can call him.
yeah, they raised an extraordinary amount of money.
also possible that you'd be a candidate for being combined with something else, like, so Festival by the Sea, right?
4th of July.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's putting a group of people together and then targeting 3 or 4 or 5 key times
Yeah.
throughout that calendar year, and then looking at opportunities within those times to either create a new event or piggyback on something, and I think there's the Historical Society and the Community Center and the Rotary Club, and, I think there's there'd be enough juice
Yeah.
once a committee got formed, got put together.
Yeah, the town of Essex is having their, is it 150th, I think?
Bicentennial, I think.
Or is it 200th? Is it 200th? I don't know. I can't remember what it is, but that's in
Right.
2019, I think, and they've got like a particular event scheduled every month. But, just using Paul and Bruce as an example, it wasn't meant to, to nail them, but, you know, they were nice guys and they wanted to get this project done, but neither one of them had ever thought about trying to raise
Not easy.
$175,000 to make that project happen,
Yeah.
you know, so.
All right, so do we want to put a stake in the ground for when we want to have a committee put together?
I don't think we need to, well, my own feeling is I don't think we need to do that tonight. I think we need to just decide that we'd like a committee to begin to take shape and then start to announce that and get some feedback from people and get some names, and then we could be ready then to announce that a committee's being formed. Unless you want to say by March 1st, or,
I think just having some sort of goal would be a good idea. I'd like to get an idea from you whether or not you think March, June,
you can't go too far.
Okay, there we go.
I would
That's
say,
all I'm
I would say
looking at.
March or April at the latest.
All right,
Yeah.
Why don't we say March 1st?
that's what I was looking for.
And
I'll talk to Dan. I think we need some guidance on composition. You're right on that. And kind of get some, because the more specific we could be about what the job is,
Yeah.
better
Operation,
likely to get
promotion,
people to,
Fundraising.
right, to come forward, because, you know, if you don't know what you're signing up for. So I think if we can be specific,
Yeah,
that would be good.
okay.
Just as an aside, the plaque on the inside of Seaside One lists all of the people involved,
Oh.
if you want to go look at
Yeah.
that too.
because the excess money from the celebration actually restored Seaside One,
Oh,
with
right.
the exception of the cupola on top, which
Right.
was done as a separate fundraiser.
Right.
Okay,
Good to know.
good to know. Maybe we can get our cobblestones. Sorry.
Okay, good to go on that. Item 5, the consent agenda. So we have in the consent agenda a 2018 seasonal population increase estimate. Depending on how we set that, it can configure our options for more or less seasonal liquor licenses. We have a donation from the Clara B. Winthrop Charitable Trust in the amount of $10,000. We have a resident letter from September requesting that boats be kept 150 feet beyond the low water mark at Kettle Cove. And we have Board of Selectmen minutes. On the resident letter, the thinking is that we should pass that to the HAC, the Harbor Advisory Committee, to evaluate whether or not, in fact, we can do anything and make recommendations. The donation letter, the donation from the Charitable Trust, we have a thank you letter that we've written up that we would like to send to them. And then, does anybody have any comments on the other items?
Yeah, our population, according to our last census, was about, what, 5818 or something like that, or 5880, something like that. Do people feel that our population goes up that amount during the summer? I mean, when I was growing up, there were no full-time residents living on Proctor Street or Masconomo Street,
Right.
with the exception of one house, where your dad and your family grew up. And those people would just, all the people on Smith's Point would come in
The summer?
April, May, and then they'd leave. So the population did definitely increase then. Do we have a request for seasonal liquor licenses, or is this?
And we haven't had one.
Yeah, I don't remember one.
So you can keep it at the census number if you like. Or you don't have to do anything. There's no requirement.
So
to-
what's the purpose of doing it then? I guess is my point. Is it just a,
If you wanted to have the option,
oh, I see, okay.
then you could do that. But if there's not a demand, there's no real need, if
So this would be a seasonal license like the Bath and Tennis has,
Right.
where they're open from, the middle of May through the middle of October or something like that.
Do we have any unused seasonal licenses right now, or is this required to add to that?
I don't know that.
Nope, that's the only one. We haven't had any requests.
Right, but could we issue one now?
You could, I guess, because we have a full license available, so I guess it'd be up to you to determine whether you want, how you wanted to use it.
Oh,
So the yacht club is also a seasonal license, right? Or is that a full,
It's,
they get a full
Yeah.
year?
it's a full year.
Okay.
The bath and tennis is the only seasonal one.
Yeah.
Okay. So, is the thinking to keep it at the census numbers then? Which currently on this form is 5620,
Is it,
That's
that's what,
the number that Denise gave me.
right? Yeah.
It's always interested whether we have to take the federal census number or the more accurate, accurately determined census number based on if you want to register dogs and get beach stickers, and then you get higher.
All right, so leave it at the 5620?
mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right. Any changes to the Board of Selectmen minutes?
No, I can bow out of that, I wasn't there.
What's that?
I can't vote on it because I wasn't there.
All right, we'll extract the Board of Selectmen minutes. From the consent agenda, all right, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda without the Board of Selectmen minutes?
So moved.
Get a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll make a motion, we approve the December 4th, 2017 minutes of the Board of Selectmen.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Abstain.
Right. Okay, in correspondence, we have a letter from Conoco Engineers regarding the Manchester number 23 substation on 23 Summer Street. This is just information regarding the recommendations for mediation there. MAPC letter dated December 20th, for call for project concepts, and an update on Superfine Restaurant. They say they will be open the week of the 8th, which is
Today.
today. So hopefully they've got their construction under.
They had contractors there today.
Did anyone else get the letter from the Brookwood student?
I did.
Okay, we should
No.
probably respond to that.
so I also got one, so I,
Okay.
Yeah.
thanks to Debbie, she responded.
I just want to make sure that we
What-
acknowledge that
Yeah.
student took time to write that.
Right.
They were, I think they were in, I'm not sure that I got the same one from the same
Can you
student. I suspect.
Fill those in that didn't get one?
I don't know, it was just a letter from a student about smoking.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
Smoking, it's to ban smoking.
right, but I'm not sure that.
from Brookwood? Is that
Yeah.
what you-
Student from Brookwood.
Student
Right.
from,
Yeah, just, I think I might have gotten that early because that's the daughter of the mother that
Oh,
we
okay.
met with.
Okay,
And I gave her my card, and I think that's
why it's here.
how that
They
came.
were
because
handwritten in our mailbox.
Yeah,
so-
Oh, so it's probably in there.
Yeah,
Probably in the
so
mailbox.
I think I might have gotten mine earlier, because when I got it, I usually look to see what's in other people's mailboxes to see if they're getting the duplicates.
I just
So-
want to make sure we acknowledge.
But I've sent a letter and just saying the
That
Board
was-
of
yeah, I was
Selectmen is
gonna
working with the
recommend it.
Board of Health to make sure,
Okay.
and told her what we're doing, so.
Just wanted to make sure somebody responded. That's all.
all right. Next would be the budget discussion.
Oh, I can tell
Oh,
now.
what about, town administrator.
Yeah, it's actually listed after. Do you want to do the report first and then the budget session, or do you want to do the budget session discussion first?
I don't think so.
doesn't matter, budget discussion is fine.
Let's do budget discussion first.
I hope not.
On my dining room table.
Yep.
Oh, I should already- Done doing.
So, okay, so this is the first time you've met since receiving the preliminary budget, so I was hopeful that you've had a chance to go through some of the materials. Obviously a busy time of year, so maybe not as much as you would like, and there's still more time to do that. But nonetheless, I thought it'd be helpful to hear some preliminary thoughts that people might have. I've outlined 4 key areas that the FinCom is identifying, at least on a preliminary basis. They'll be meeting again on Wednesday to further refine their thoughts on these 4 areas. But it does seem like these are 4 topics that they are particularly interested in. So I wanted to share those with you. And the other key point here is, as the school project advances, it may be helpful if you are able to give some guidance as to your thoughts on what is affordable. And I know that's loaded as a concept, but I just don't want to get to a point where they've done all their work and then you say, wait a minute, that's just much too much of a high of a price tag for us to even to consider. If there are some parameters that you think should be out on the table earlier rather than later, then I think that would be helpful.
And we haven't talked with them about any of that yet? Has that
No.
not happened?
There has not been any of that kind of discussion.
I thought, maybe I misunderstood, I thought those were starting with the finance side of the discussion with the building committee on that? No, there hasn't been any?
No,
Okay.
no.
I would say, I agree, I think but I think it needs to be collaborative, and I think we need to understand where they are in the process, what they've got as numbers, where they've started with the financing. You know, Avi was going in and getting some initial numbers to start working with. So, I think it's hard to set a direction or a clarity around what that number should be in a vacuum. And I would just like to understand a little bit further, and I don't disagree that we shouldn't set some expectations, but I would like to understand kind of where their thinking is at this point and get a sort of slice and time on
I would differ a little bit.
that. You can do that.
I don't actually want to know where they are.
Mhm.
I want us to be able, in conjunction with the finance committee, to decide what the town is planning to absorb, not just with this school, but inclusive of our requirement on the Essex school over the next, what is it, 3 to 5 years? I don't know.
No, lot longer.
5 to 7?
Yeah.
Oh, still, you know, when we start servicing debt on the size that we're servicing,
Mhm.
5 to 10 years is actually not a crazy amount of time out. In addition to some of the other things that are in the strategic plan that, you know, seem in varying degrees of imminence, you know, sewage treatment plant, like, we don't have to make a commitment on that. But we know conceptually that if we were to do something in the next 5 to 10 years, we're looking at a rough ballpark, anywhere from 10 to 30 million, call it 20, I don't know. There needs to be some exercise where, independent of what they are doing on the design process, they know more than I do on the school design process. But we have a capacity to service debt. And where does that stack up, and per where we want the town to be in, let's say, 10 years, as an ongoing exercise of managing debt service? What do we want to be chewing off in what time frame, regardless of the design of any school?
Right, and I don't disagree with that, but I wouldn't just limit this discussion to the school debt. I would say
No, I
that
don't.
I want to make
Yeah.
sure that we look at it strategically on all the things you're talking about. The way I read this request was to do it just for the school project. That's why I was saying, let's understand what that is. But if we're looking at it in the holistic version of everything we want to do and how we want to look at this strategically, then I'm totally on board with it. What I don't want to do is cherry pick the school out of the process of
Oh,
looking at the
absolutely
whole.
not. No,
Okay.
I don't want to look at it specific to the school.
Good.
As a first step.
That's
If
good.
we are to account for the school, however, I want to include the Essex portion.
That makes sense, totally makes
Because
sense.
it is, I think, myopic to look at our financial picture specific to Memorial,
No.
when we know that
It's
even if it is
coming.
up to 5 years later, it's still coming.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I
When
totally
you
agree
say
with
up,
that.
so up to 5 years later, you're talking about the Essex,
The Essex piece. Again,
yeah, more than 5 years.
Is it more than 10?
No.
If it's not more than 10, then I
Yeah.
still
Then
include
it
it,
needs,
it's
should,
still,
needs to be
it's
included.
still
Yes.
included as part of, you know.
Totally on board as long as it's holistic and
And I'm
everything's
not
there.
interested, I'm not suggesting in dictating anything to the school committee whatsoever. I think that it's ultimately the town that decides whether or not this thing gets funded. And I, on a personal basis, want it funded.
Mhm.
I want it funded while simultaneously ensuring that as a body, this group, as well as in concert with the finance committee, that we're being stewards of the town in addition to filling a desperate need to improve Memorial.
Yeah.
So
And
at the multi-board meeting, we outlined exactly this kind of process, right? Where we laid out the rough 5 and 10-year plans and capital capacities for the towns and what was coming up. And this would really just be the ideal extension of that, the continuation of that process, namely putting some meat on the bones of, some more meat on the bones of what our needs were gonna be in the 10 to 20-year range. And let that be the guidance to the schools. And it's not gonna be any one single guidance, it's going to have to be something of a process to continue updating everybody on what the options are. And a little bit of a give and take process, because we'll definitely have to move these pieces around to make everything fit. Can't do it all at once, obviously. So, where to go from that? So, Finance Committee, did you say that you had a few people who are interested in working with you to look at some of that longer-range planning?
Right, yes. So there are 3 members of the FinCom who have volunteered to take a hard look at the long-range forecasting of debt, taking a look at whether we can, on the town side, go on a cash basis approach,
Yeah.
which obviously would help significantly if we could.
Who is on tap to do that?
Maury and Sarah and John.
Oh, good.
I think that's a great approach, and I think, I like the idea of a sort of small group working on it to put the focus and then bringing back the details that they see.
Yeah.
Yep.
Recommendations. No, I think it's an important, particularly with the master planning and everything that's going
So
on.
they'll need to obviously be hooked in with the updates from the master planning
Mhm.
process.
Which they are pretty connected with at this point, so we'll make sure. That's all in the next phase of what we're doing, so it's called monetizing the master plan.
Is there a complementary analysis that we can do that, we don't know, no one knows, but is there any sort of modeling exercise we can do complementary wise to what the impact of, potential new impact of the federal tax law is on the town? We know the town averages, it's published data.
Right.
Can we run a simulation to show what the impact on households could be in the town? Because one of the things that we're not factoring in is the appetite of households that are gonna go to town meeting who may not be in the same mindset come next fall, after they've paid after they paid taxes this year and are staring at what next year, the following
Yeah, it could be.
Right, the
year is
first,
gonna,
yeah.
in November, people may not, it'll be the close
Fully
of.
appreciate it,
Yeah. After paying taxes this year under the old regime, the next November, they will be finishing the calendar year, tax year, with some ideas of what their new picture may look like. So, do we have any insight, even on a modeled basis?
I don't. I've read a few articles, some economists are projecting, a 10% decline in
Mhm.
values in high-end communities. But that's real speculation at this point. I don't know how to model it.
Well, we know, I think there's a couple of things to project. We know income
Right.
on average. We know property value on average. We know the mix ratio of new home buyers to existing home owners. There are some factors that play into what the town's mood could be, even if they're just directional or informational. I just think the vote in November is not gonna be this, in a vacuum, up or down vote on the design of a school building. It's gonna be a lot more loaded than that.
I'm just struggling how to quantify that.
Yeah.
I agree we have those data points. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I'm happy to work with somebody on it, but, I'm not saying I have the answer how to nail it down, but it's a kind of an atmospheric factor that we do need to at least provide or introduce. It may not,
Well, because it's relevant in the point that when the school does come forward in September, whatever we look, there's typically a number given to what your tax rate will increase.
yeah. if
And
it's-
knowing what that is in the context of the future climate or the next it's gonna be an important piece.
Well, some of the numbers that you've been doing back in the envelope suggest 10%.
Combined with the standard 2.5, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if a proposal that comes forward, let's say hypothetically suggests a residual 10% increase potentially to people's, residential taxes
Right.
in town, combined with the virtual effect of a federal tax change, creating the feel of an increased tax, even if their taxes haven't gone up. Maybe in some cases people's taxes went down, but then their ability to deduct state creates this virtual feel that your
Right.
taxes went up.
That's the problem.
Right.
It's this-
All of a sudden, your taxes have gone up 20%, now that you voted for the school. That's something that the school committee is not responsible for accounting for. We are, and the finance committee is, because that has to do with the makeup of the town, not the school. And I just want to make sure that the school committee is provided insight into that before they introduce anything at a meeting. And I'm not saying it should change their design plans, but it
No.
may,
But it could influence.
could be a factor that influences a good versus a better versus a best decision on school design.
I did see some comments here and there, or hear some comments here and there about people who are interested in developing exactly that projection, what the impact to the region of the federal tax bill was going to be. It's possible that there are some volunteers who could be prevailed upon with expertise.
I think that could be part of the guidance if we were to give something to the school committee. It doesn't, that's not meant to dictate any of their decisions. It's more just to guide and make them aware.
Yeah, these are the dynamics in the town that are gonna be
Yeah.
coming into play.
Well, and I think to Eli's point, it's that next level down of looking at what we started to look at in terms of the operational pieces and all of that, but really digging into the numbers and having it be modeled and relevant so that people can look at it and make when you're talking the broad brush, it's one thing. When you hear it at your tax rate, what it will mean to you, it becomes another story, so.
Double whammy.
Yeah, and it's important that you don't want to set up the school district for failure. So the better we can indicate where we're headed.
All right. So what else would you like feedback on right now? I think we just covered the schools, right?
Well, I think we touched
Fire
on the-
fire
The
and
whole
police
thing.
staffing?
That was part of the capital funding strategy.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean it as an isolated discussion about school,
Fair enough.
but yeah.
Yeah. So on fire and police staffing, I don't think anything that I've heard really alters my position on where we landed on fire staffing. I think we went over that for a long period of time before we came to the conclusion that we came to.
Have we heard anything about the injured officer
Yeah, I
in
didn't
terms
realize
of
that
an
was-
appeal of his case, police
It's-
officer?
It's winding its way through. So they've asked for, what's the word I want? Briefs from both sides. So it'll be before an appellate board. So we should have much better answers within another 6 to 8 weeks.
It's a long time.
Yep.
Very slow.
Yep.
Greg, are you thinking about using the technical assistance program from MAPC on the regional services possibility? That seems to be, you know, to
I
see
think
how.
it's worth talking to Essex and seeing if we submit a joint application. So I think that'd be worth pursuing.
I mean, I would think that an application to service two communities would be stronger than, or, you know, a regular application to service two communities would be stronger than an application to service one community.
Correct. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
And this is for what, just in general, regional
Well, it
services?
could be anything from DPW, it could be to fire, you know, I mean, Essex has got a lot of irons in the fire right now in terms of, you know, a new public safety building, and is the new public safety building gonna be just a fire station? Is it gonna be a police and fire station?
I feel like we need to get, we sat here last year and had the same discussion about dispatch and all these other things, and we were gonna try to take things off cycle and get some things done. We haven't done any of that. So I feel like we need to really be specific about what we're looking to do. I think getting the funding from MAPC for regionalization is good. I think having real-time discussions now about the DPW position while we're in the search process is really important. I think looking at the regional dispatch centers, where they are at this point, the update on what's going on with them at this point and where they are,
Right, we're still waiting for that audit of their
thing, but.
the rec, so that should be, it's in the final drafting stage, a review of the draft, so.
So hopefully
one's that?
that's getting close, the rec.
So the rec
Audit.
commissioned an audit of their operations and recommendations for how best to go forward.
Yeah.
So
It's
that
due in, like,
report
first week of
should be
December.
out. We had hoped in November, then December, and now here it is January, so.
And then the other one that I was thinking of was the whole IT piece that we talked about,
Right.
in terms of moving our structure, consolidating the operations of that. Because all of those, at the end of the day, I think what's in the budget makes sense. I think the general direction that people are looking in, but we're still looking at the same issues, number of people and staffing,
Right.
public safety, and we're looking at raising fees. I think we need to have some scenarios push through that may not happen in the first half of the year, but directionally could get us someplace in the second half, or at least come up with a transition plan for some of these key items like DPW, like the rec center, like the IT solutions, that will give us some leeway in thinking about the budget a little differently. That combined with this sort of capital strategic look, I think will take us another level in the budget.
Maybe. I did have a question about increasing, or a couple of questions about increasing fees and fines. This is something that FinCom brought up. They noted harbor, and did they have a particular concern about the harbor fees? Because to my mind, waterways rates and harbor fees, we had been letting those be driven through the HAC and the dredging committee, primarily to support future dredging projects. And that was sort of what they're reserved to do, right, is fund dredging projects and to some extent the harbor master. Did the FinCom have a particular line of thinking about harbor fees?
They feel that there's probably still room to increase them. And the dredging projects, you know, doing a phase every 10 years seems a long way off right now to them. So with the grant, we're probably able to move phase two up sooner. But there's concern that that is too long of a timeline. And by increasing the fees even more than they are now, that timeline could be moved up in terms of doing more dredging sooner.
Why did FinCom feel it was too long of a timeline, out of curiosity?
Concerned that there are people bottoming out now, and we won't be able to get to those areas.
So,
But on the other hand, there's talk about reconfiguring the harbor so that deep draft boats are concentrated in one area,
Right.
so that we don't have to
Yeah,
have the whole harbor. deep.
exactly. I mean, I would be inclined to defer to the Harbor Advisory Committee and the Dredging Committee on the schedule of the dredging as opposed to FinCom.
So it was really just a general comment of, we still have a 10-year waiting list. I'm sure we could increase those fees, and,
No.
private mooring is $3,000 a year, and we're paying $500 here. It was more along those lines.
Well, I guess what I'd say is,
Big difference between
We
a
should
private mooring and
ask the,
Yes.
I mean, it might be reasonable for the Harbor Advisory Committee, the Dredging Committee to go and look at the 10, 20-year planning, just do some very rough projections of how much money they'll have in the pot, and is it in the ballpark for funding those things? I think it would be reasonable to hand that task to those guys. Because that's not like that's money that's going to go into the general fund or
Correct.
calculations for other debt service. So we're either going to have that money through our waterways or we're not. And we're probably not anticipating funding dredging through the general fund if it's not available through the waterways too terribly much. But it would be worth having that information from Harbor. And on Park and Rec, were there specific areas where they had across the fees and fines? I mean, for fines, we actually increased fines some last year for speeding, right?
Park and Rec,
Parking,
they were
sorry.
interested in non-resident season walk-on pass. And did we find out if
We
there's
just
a
increased-
sunset, there's a sunset?
So town
Time.
council does feel like we are no longer obligated to that.
Okay, so in other words, we don't have to tie that $17.50 to 2 times $17.50 equaling $35 for our things, yeah. So, because they just increased the
So they did increase.
daily walk-on to 7.
Right.
So I can't imagine too many people are gonna say, oh, I'm only gonna come to the beach twice this summer. So they figure that, if they go more than twice, they're saving money by buying a season pass, but now maybe you put the season pass at
20 apiece.
25,
Yeah, 25 apiece.
30,
That's-
whatever it happens to be. 'Cause
Still a
there are-
heck of a deal.
It's still a heck of a deal.
Yeah,
It
because
is.
the large number of people definitely come to the beach. Like, not every weekend. Some do every weekend, but some every other weekend, but
So I guess what I was really getting at with my comment, and I was trying to figure this out, is about increasing fees and fines, is that we actually rely on the individual owners of those areas to make recommendations, so that the recommendations fit with their expertise of a particular area. So rather than somebody high up making a global assessment of the fines and fees, should be the individual committees that go and review them. And I suppose they should review them annually, and it seems to me like they already do, but that much has to be locally analyzed, I think.
And in terms of operating budget, the schools say they were coming back to work with the FinCom. I think you mentioned in here January.
So either the 17th or the 24th
Okay.
were the two dates that were tentatively identified. So they're hoping that members of the school committee will be in.
Because I'm very interested to hear how they're gonna make up that gap,
Right, right.
what their plan
I
is, and
got
what's realistic.
$500,000 to find.
Exactly. So I think we need to just, that to me is an overarching piece here to understand
Yep.
their strategy on that.
Any other guidance people have on the budget?
I don't know if there's anything for next year that can be done, but is there any more thinking tied to trying to increase our non-residential tax? And has the ratio changed at all, or is it?
No, it hasn't. So I think, again, looking towards the master plan, talk about changing the zoning in the limited commercial district is probably the biggest potential for having an impact there. And it seems like there's some support for that.
Tremendous amount from what we've heard. I mean.
At least
from
people
other
who people who are weighing in, at
People
least.
that are weighing in are supportive of it, so, I mean, our goal is to try to get something framed up for April town meeting, to talk a little bit about guidelines on the development, plan first, if there's anything we need to bring forward, to try to get something in to town meeting to talk about it, because the longer, if we wait another year,
Right.
we're just losing so much time. So our push is trying to get something formulated this month to see what we might be able to bring towards town meeting on that.
Is there documented data on the business environment today from the business owners?
Nothing scientific.
Is that something that
Anecdotal,
Doesn't affect the
maybe.
budget, but is that something that we could do, maybe in the next 6 months or something like that? To, I don't know, it's a survey or something like that, just to actually collect some input from the business owners, maybe to help guide some.
We've had a couple of roundtables and forums with them.
Yeah.
And gotten some information, it's not gonna call it hard data, but I can ask Sue. I mean, she's probably got some ideas on what that would be.
I haven't gotten the greatest vibe about the mood this fall and this
Yeah.
winter.
It's hard.
Some of it may be seasonal, some of it may be bigger, and if it's bigger, are there other things that
Right.
happening that we need to be aware of?
Yeah.
I guess on
So
a
we
more
don't,
tactical basis for the budget, did anything, in the conversation about the beach kind of triggered my memory, was there anything about the parking shuttle, looking at ways of generating revenue from, that we talked about it, and then we kind of had got some interesting germs of ideas. I don't know if anything had evolved further.
Yeah, no, it didn't, hasn't really gone anywhere yet.
I'm just wondering if that, even if it's small dollars, could, anything to help.
I would have thought, actually, if, I mean, the school might, that's a good point, the school would probably be interested in anything that could help fill in their budget, so I can go and,
I don't mean to create work for you.
no, that's all right, I sort of started poking that at it anyway, so I'd be happy to talk to the,
It's kind of like we win in a couple of different ways by decreasing traffic, generating some revenue. I don't even know whether you create special offers, like you put a beach pass in with the parking if you park somewhere else.
Mhm.
And so you get parking and a beach pass
yeah, yeah.
for a lower cost than,
Right, getting a ticket,
yeah.
not paying for your beach.
But I don't want to take away from the parking revenue by the train station.
I think there's plenty for both.
Yeah.
we've talked about, periodically, we've talked about the water treatment plant and training up people and becoming our own operators of that plant.
Yes.
Where do we stand on that?
So, so the current vendor's contract ends this end of June. So we have asked Paul Cody, who's our water plant engineer
That and how?
consultant, to map out what it would take to bring that in-house, and then also, as a fallback, make sure we're ready to go out to bid for, at least on a shorter-term basis, if we're not quite ready.
And other towns around us, they have their own people doing this work.
Yes. I would say the majority of towns do.
And as part of the Tatter and Howard effort, going to be, is it a possibility to share a certified engineer for, along with our people to, is that part of the sort of proposals that they'll put together?
Right, yes.
What
There's some
ti-
different options for staffing.
Sort of what time frame is that going to be coming out in?
So we need to do that over the next 3 months, in terms of mapping out those options, and then,
I guess my question was really, is it going to come in a time frame that it will allow us to impact our budget planning? Or are we going to still have to budget $350,000 for Woodard and Kern for another, for the next fiscal year?
so the more conservative approach would be to keep that budget number the same, but with the hope of not having to spend it all. And then have in 20, certainly have a definitive number that's lower.
Okay. All right.
So in terms of,
Just one more question.
yeah, no,
Why
absolutely.
the decrease in new property tax? It's like a significant decline of 100,000 over the course of 2 years.
From new growth. So we hit a high mark in the 350 range a few years back. We tend to be conservative in estimating it, and around that 250 number. So we estimated 250 for this current year, and it came in at 275.
Okay.
So-
So it could be 275 again?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically, our new growth numbers are pretty much straight line, but when you get a big project like the 601 Summer Street, Lindman Circle, or the Sawmill Brook project on Elm Street, that pushes our new growth
Increases slightly.
significantly up, like 125 K or something like that, just for those projects.
So in terms of your process and sort of review, just basically have this as a standing item for most meeting agendas going forward. Maybe target a couple sessions with the FinCom. They were looking at the February 7th meeting of theirs to talk about some of their recommendations. So, yeah, we need a new calendar. So that's a Wednesday, the first Wednesday.
And are they 7 or 7:30?
Normally seven.
Varies. Normally 7, but
This week, they're meeting a half hour later, they're meeting at 7:30, but normally 7.
Okay, I can never remember.
Do you think not to try to tie too many things back together, but per the conversation we had at the beginning of this section, if we end up doing more work in the weeks ahead, can we expand the capital project section? It has a 5-year window, would it be appropriate to expand it to a 10-year? So that we give the town greater visibility into what is really on the horizon? Because when you talk debt servicing,
Right. So,
10 years is, I think, for a
So-
town like Manchester, is probably a more appropriate view.
right, no, I agree. So yes, the short answer is yes. I don't know if we would have, well, we'd have placeholders. There would be,
Or even just that maybe you don't change the models, maybe we just add a paragraph that's putting some more visibility into the 5 to 10 year window.
right, basically you would extend sort of the average, but identify some one-offs, large projects.
You'll know that that's like those water treatment
Water
plant,
treat- yeah.
those things that will come down.
Yes. Yeah, I think the biggest wild card on the town side is the sewer plant. In terms of, can we fortify in place, or do we have to do something much more? We're pleasantly surprised that it did just fine over this storm surge that we had on Thursday. It stayed dry.
And we had as big a storm surge as I can remember in years.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was up 15 inches on this building,
Yeah,
so.
I've never heard of that lot flooding.
yeah, it came into the basement, it came into the garage at the police station, came into the lower level
That door that they
at the
use.
police station that the police officers use.
And there were icebergs floating in that parking lot.
Yeah, I saw the pictures.
And,
I heard about it from Gretchen.
yes, I'm sure. Yes.
And it came into the basement and the hose tower at the fire station also, in through the channel,
Oh, yeah?
back up that way, so. And the one thing we had going for us, it was a one high tide cycle storm.
Yeah, versus.
The storm never kept, stayed with us long enough to keep the water in. So, the water comes in and only 15% of it goes back out, and then more comes back in, so.
Well, and I don't ever remember it coming up onto Beach Street the way it did.
Yeah.
Up through the park.
Right, yeah, it came,
I mean, I saw some video of, I never remember that
Yeah.
happening.
Backed up in the storm drains on a couple places on Beach Street.
But we were still lucky in comparison to other
we were,
places.
we got lucky.
Yeah.
Very lucky.
It makes me worry about the future.
Well, I think it's, this
Yeah.
one now is making everybody
Right.
finally accept
Right.
that if there was one, there will be more. It's just a question of how long.
Yeah,
So the planning is necessary.
this, yeah. Yes.
So we're back to meetings, meeting planning, February 7th with FinCom. And so, last year, we took the approach that we were just going to, we didn't go line by line through the budget approving them. We did bulk approvals, which I think we can do again towards the end when FinCom is doing it. The question is, what areas, I think in between now and then, do we want to drill down on? Some of it, I think we've done to some extent already. The fire department staffing, the police staffing, we have significant discussions around that already, but we may want to revisit it. Are there particular areas that people want to come back to and plan to come back to that are not already in this list? That we've not already talked about, and not the obvious ones?
Just the ones that I gave earlier.
Okay.
Just the stronger long-term debt view. Particularly with what we know is the vote in November. And if this is going to town meeting in the spring, I feel like we would be prudent to have some more documented as part of the budget, not specific to the school. But part of the budget.
Okay, what else would you like on budget right now?
That's good. I'm good.
Okay.
I might, and not to overplay the tax thing, but I might, doesn't change the model, but I might introduce a risk section of things that you don't control and no one controls. And one of the unknowns is the effect of the federal tax changes to town tax revenue, and that's something that you can't really model, but you want to acknowledge as something that is an unknown risk to the town.
Yep.
And you might even, just back to the storm, you might acknowledge the storm. There are things that may cause, I didn't see a risk section.
No, there's not.
It might be worth having
Yeah,
a risk
that's it.
section.
Yeah.
Just something to fall back on, saying, we've done our best, there are acts of God, and
Force majeure, was that what they call it?
there are people in Washington, and there are lots of things that we don't control that
Right.
will affect the town,
Force majeures.
from an expense standpoint as well as risk to revenue.
Okay, is that it? Can we move to town administrator's report? Go ahead.
Continued uncertainty on healthcare costs.
Right, yep. Okay, actually, maybe I'll sort of continue on the theme of the storm, and just quick updates there. Overall, we fared pretty well. The crews did a great job keeping up with the amount of snow we received and dealing with the various issues. Obviously, the flooding of Town Hall parking lot here was caught us by surprise in terms of the intensity and depth of that water. The deepest that people had seen, and if not, certainly in a long time, if not forever. So half a dozen cars did probably get ruined out back here, with water up to the doorknobs of the cars. We did have some minor water intrusion into Town Hall, but nothing major. Just some flooring damage that will not be too costly.
Do we have some liability at all with those cars? Is
No,
it-
we don't.
it's-
So we did ask insurance,
Mm.
looking for some relief for the homeowner.
Well,
property
sure,
owner, the car
sure.
owners, but unfortunately, no. They will not cover that. We've had a couple of water line breaks, Butler Avenue that got fixed today. There's another leak on Morse Court that we are trying to track down. Hopefully that'll get tracked down tonight and
Has that
tomorrow.
impacted people's use of water up in there?
Hasn't. People are
Yeah, anyway.
still getting water. It's leaking, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not sufficient to cause it to not supply people. So that's cold-related, no doubt. We do have some challenges up at the water plant. We had again, this was cold-related, not storm-related, but we don't know for sure what caused the chemical feed line to break. It might be cold-related. We're just getting the investigation underway now. So the engineers will take a look at that and see if they can pinpoint that problem. But it's all been cleaned up, and so from that perspective, there's no hazard or anything like that left.
Who's doing the postmortem on that?
I'm sorry, who is?
Which engineers?
Taylor and Howard,
Okay.
Paul Cody
Yep.
will be doing that for us. The sprinkler system, it's a dry system above, all the pipes are in the attic above the above the insulation, so it's unheated space. Something caused that system to get charged with water. We don't know why. We suspect a faulty valve. Again, we need to investigate that. But anyways, the system was charged and then has frozen solid, and has frozen and burst all the joints. So that whole system has to be removed, and that'll happen tomorrow. This is covered by insurance. Our same adjuster who dealt with the roof is back with us. He's a good guy, and we worked well together, but we're not happy to see him back because it means we've got a problem. They will cover the cost of replacing that system, but we are trying to figure out what caused the problem. And so the insurance company will be helping us investigate that to see if there's any warranty issues in terms of the installer. It's only a couple years old.
I'd say that's almost a brand-new
It's a
system.
brand-new system.
Hmm.
Yep. So something went awry, whether a heater failed or a valve, a defective valve that caused the water to go into the system when it shouldn't have, and the alarm should have gone off when it was charged, and that did not happen either. So it might have just slowly leaked water into the system over a number of weeks, we don't know. So that's being at least dealt with. We want to get the system removed because with 50-degree weather, if all of that ice melts, it would rain down and ruin the ceiling and potentially shut down the plant. So we don't want that to happen. So I'm happy that at least we can get a crew in there tomorrow and they'll get it out, that whole system removed before things thaw out. So that's the good news part of it. Was that?
You better move quickly, I think tomorrow's supposed to be the 38.
Yes, it is.
Can't win. We're getting damaged with the cold weather, and we could get more damage with warmer weather. You
Right.
can't, Mother Nature's crazy.
We did sustain some damage at Seaside One. The flood, the surge did get into the basement and knocked out the furnace that heats the lower level. That furnace was on its last legs anyways. Insurance, they're debating whether or not they're gonna cover this one. So we'll hear from them shortly on that.
Is that oil or gas?
I wonder why they would debate that. If it was water.
Yeah, and they may just give us a few dollars because of the age of that furnace.
Oh, okay.
So that's the question, whether they get
Yeah.
replacement
Is that oil or gas?
or, gas. It's gas. So, we have space heated, portable heaters in there, keeping, so it's not freezing up on us. So, for the most, that's the overall view. Ocean Street actually did pretty well. It obviously had the, was that,
The beach house, that scene?
not,
No,
No.
nothing.
Door that was open or
Those-
something, but,
It just barely came up to the circle.
yeah.
Most of the berm is still there.
Yeah, which is good.
We're in good shape that way.
The request for the post-incident report on the communication for the town
Right.
hall parking.
right,
So I would love to see sort of what your group comes up with, whoever
right.
would be involved in that.
Yep.
To let us know, because we've made a commitment to get back
Yes.
to folks.
Sorry, I missed what you were.
Just how we communicate.
How you communicate parking behind town hall, when the floodwaters went up, how do you get in touch with people? Sort of what happened with that, because we
Well, I
lost
think
6
a lot
cars.
of groups are facing that, communities are facing
Yeah.
how to deal with that one in the future, too.
Yeah, so it's good lessons learned,
Yeah.
what can you do?
Yeah.
I did explain to Gretchen that you had Todd Fitzgerald running around saving the town. His own house was underwater, and oh, by the way, he got in his truck and plowed people's driveways at 11:30 at night. That guy, he showed up at my house. I was like, "What are you doing here? Go home."
Yeah, right. Didn't have a problem.
Yep.
He probably had more damage to his house than
Oh,
any person in town did.
He got nailed.
So, yes,
Is there anything, this is more, wasn't an incident, but I did notice, I was just curious, Rockport, I think at one point closed all the streets. Is that something that, is there an escalation within emergency decision-making as to whether that happens in town? Is there a point at where the town,
yes, I mean, that would be the role of
Which is
Tom and
Manchester
George.
director.
Yeah, and asking Eli to declare a state of emergency.
did we approach that? or-
Well, I talked to Eli about it the day before. We had a emergency management meeting here at noontime the day before the storm, and the only thing that we talked about that we didn't do was have sandbags available for a couple of public buildings, which we certainly could have used because we didn't have the sand to put in them. We have sand with plenty of salt in it, but we don't have just the sand, so we're talking
But if
about,
things had escalated,
I
Yeah.
was curious,
Yeah.
serious question, not a criticism.
so yes, there's a mechanism in place to declare emergencies and, DPW would be shutting down, put barriers up on closing roads and things like that.
Tux Point.
Tux Point, Chowder House. And Tux Point, in terms of storm damage,
Storm, yeah.
nothing.
it fared fine. Water did come over the seawall.
Rotunda's fine?
Rotunda survived. The gangway down to the floats was twisted, but nothing major. It needs repair, but it's certainly repairable. So the water was lapping at that walkway level.
That's happened before on a high tide. That it's come right to the base of the rotunda on high tides.
Oh, I thought you meant the shower house.
No,
Oh.
Rotunda,
Oh,
yeah.
all right.
Okay.
So speaking of Tux Point and the Chowder House though, that project is running into some significant surprises in terms of the condition of the building. The engineers are surprised that that building is still standing, particularly how it survived a couple of winters ago with all that snow load. They are amazed that it stayed standing. There's not much holding that building up. The floor is not tied to the building, it's a floating floor. There is no real foundation, they're just small concrete piers at best. They don't go down very far.
That's probably why the floor is floating.
Was that?
That's probably why the floor is floating.
Yes, yes. Yeah. There's only really two supports that are holding up the whole roof with a couple of bolts into some jury-rigged timber. So it's surprising. So we will have a better sense of what sort of additional costs we're looking at, hopefully by the end of this week. We're hoping our strategy can be that we can take out some of the cosmetic work and redirect those dollars towards the structural work in conjunction with a pretty good hit on the reserve fund for now, and then replenish both come town meeting.
How much have we spent on the project so far?
I don't know that, in terms of actual dollars, I don't know if we paid them yet for anything. I don't know if they've submitted their first invoice or not.
Well, regardless of whether or not we paid this, whether we may well still owe a bunch of money. The question is, at some point, is it going to be the case that we need to rethink that project and pull back, stop spending money on it, and consider refunding it with a different angle, like rebuilding it? Or is that something that's on the horizon?
Well, you could certainly, I mean, the comment has been made it'd be cheaper to start fresh than rebuild. I don't know if there's an appetite for that in terms of the historic or romanticized vision of the
Yeah, no, I get it.
of the structure.
Well, it could look the same.
Yeah, you can make it look the same.
I
Yeah.
would wonder
Safety kind of
conservation
trumps
issues.
historic.
Right.
Yeah.
I would wonder conservation issues at that point. Might come into play.
Well, the footprint would remain the same.
I think it's a good question to ask them from
Yeah.
a cost perspective.
I mean, I'm certainly happy to ask them,
Definitely.
what
Are the
if,
historic preservation funds available?
Not enough, I wouldn't think.
I mean, how much
Did
could it,
CPA put money
it's a-
in for
yeah,
this?
this is all
Oh, yeah,
CP
this
money.
is all
CPA
CPA money.
So,
So, we probably should, we need to watch the calendar too on some of these decisions.
Correct.
Because this facility has been
Well,
rented.
Rented.
well, Memorial Day is gonna be
Not
here before we
far.
know
Fast
it.
approaching.
Very gratefully, it's not far away, and for
Right.
those that have rented it, if it's not going to be available, they can't find out
Right.
a month before they're gonna hold some event up there.
So the other question is there an appetite for a special town meeting to fund?
No.
Fund.
Really? Wow. With a projected of a special town meeting in the fall to look at a school project?
how much are you ballparking the cost?
I'm hoping that another 100,000 will take care of it.
I liked your first idea, which was if we had to take it from reserve and then replenish it.
Right, that's what I'm hoping we can
Yeah,
do.
I think that would be, but I think it's worth getting the question asked about the cost overall.
Right. So it's, the original contract is for just under 300,000.
So is anything being done up there right now, or
Yeah.
we've stopped
We've
and
stopped for
doing
now.
the
I mean, they might be doing
investigation?
some minor stuff, but,
Right.
It just seems to be important to get that question answered.
Yeah. I mean, you could have a really nice place out there. And it would look very, very much like it. But it would have nicer stuff, like a nicer kitchen. I don't know.
Should get a movie.
Put a disco ball in there. That was a
We can have
joke.
our
Disco.
fundraisers. All right.
so I'll keep you posted. I'll ask them the question of, you
Yeah.
know, new versus renovate.
Okay.
Um,
Well, this was a big one, the taxes question.
Prepayment of taxes, there was a rush, about $1.5 million of additional dollars came in the last few days of December. So there's the question of postmarks we have turned down. Well, we accepted the money, but we post it when we receive it. So there may be some grumblings about that. We don't know what the IRS is going to do in terms of they accept the date on the check. Is that sufficient? We just don't know that. So stay tuned for now. No action is needed at the moment. To just give you the heads up that question may come up. The marijuana ban. So the resident has asked whether or not there will be an article banning the sale of retail marijuana. If not, they're interested in getting a petition article to do that. So I said I would ask tonight if your intention was to have an article on it or not. If you don't know, then we can say that as well. I think if we say we don't know, they'll probably go ahead with a citizen petition.
I mean, we had one, this is from a person who was very outspoken at the first marijuana, recreational marijuana listening session. We had, 15 people at the first session, maybe 20 counting members of the board who came in. The general consensus was a ban on all the different, recreational marijuana facilities that you could in the town. Some people said, they're fairly benign and you could let them go and still and collect tax revenue from them. We don't have another listening session until Saturday, the 27th, which is, the end of this month. I couldn't go out on the limb and say to this person, yeah, we're gonna vote for a ban. I wanna listen to see what's happening at the next session. It's gonna be a Saturday morning. Are we gonna get 30 people? Are we gonna get 50 people? Are we gonna get 10 people? I don't know. I know which way I'm leaning, but I certainly am not broadcasting that at the listening sessions.
Is the deadline for January 30th for citizen petitions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so the citizen petition has to be in 60 days before the town meeting.
It's not our deadline. I just want to confirm that.
I would encourage a citizen petition.
I would too.
I
just
think,
to let them
especially with
cover it.
what's happening at the federal level,
Mm.
getting involved. If the residents want to vote.
I mean, if the citizen petition, if the decision that the board makes to put something on the warrant is duplicative of the citizen petition, then I'm hoping the citizen petition, people would pull theirs. there's no sense of having two articles on the warrant that basically try to do the same thing.
And suppose we came up with a different position now.
Then there would have to be some discussion and
A different petition or different positions? I didn't hear you.
What's that?
You say a different petition or a different position? I didn't hear you.
Different position.
Position.
I mean, the two would just compete at that point, but
Yep, I would.
I mean,
Well, the point is, and I think the key thing here is if you have a citizen asking to put a petition on, and we're not gonna have a decision
Right.
till after
then-
January 30th.
Right.
So let them go
Protect
ahead
yourself and go ahead and do it.
Right.
If that's where they're feeling that they wanna go, and then we do what we do and we sort it out.
I think, Greg, the main thing I would just ask that, if you communicate with her is just to let her know that, the board isn't going to be ready to make a decision until after the second listening session, which would be too late for her to make a citizen petition.
she would still have the option of doing something in the fall. The citizen's petition is harder to do in the fall.
You want to get this done
Right.
April.
at the spring annual town meeting, and then, well, no, you could do it at the
You could,
fall too,
you've got the
because
moratorium, right?
because we have the moratorium until December 31st, so you could do it at the fall town meeting, and then
But she only needs 10 for April, and she'd need 100 for the
yeah.
fall.
Right.
that's correct, yep. But you still would have the town meeting / election cycle before the end of before the moratorium
Yeah.
came off.
So those would be the options.
There's no reason to have it, but there's no insight on the wording of what she's thinking.
No, beyond the general nature of an outright ban townwide.
Yeah, I just want to avoid the situation we had with the dog person writing a petition, and it,
Right,
all of a sudden,
right,
the intent was clear, it ended up
right.
Well, and to that point, encouraging
Going
her
20
to have the
miles over the goal.
have the conversation with Alan Wilson in putting that petition together, so he can give some guidance on how to do that.
Yeah, we can get town council's
Yeah,
guidance on that as well.
yeah.
Yeah, you just don't want to throw a wild pitch.
Right.
Right. Okay. Just an update on the DPW search. About 18 applications were received, and a little less than half are being asked to submit essay responses, and from there, 4 or 5 to be interviewed and go through an assessment process. So hoping to do the assessment process the week of the 22nd of January. We have some citizens volunteering to help. Would welcome 1 or 2 of you if you would like to participate in that. But at a minimum, would love to hear your thoughts on what you sort of hold out as key skills, key characteristics that you're looking for. So either share those in the next 5 minutes or send me an email.
Well, I think, before I really even think about it, exceptional management skills and organizational skills. It'd be great to see some
Yeah.
level of a proven communications plan that they would use, not knowing what the essay questions are that they're responding to.
And either a PE or somebody who is demonstrably capable of adequately assessing technical options and engineering options and plans
Right.
independently.
Are you
Um,
thinking through daytime work that week, Greg, or afternoons, or evenings, or you haven't got that far yet?
Yeah, I haven't gotten that far. in terms
Once
of-
you formulate that, if you let me know, I might be able to, it just kind of depends how it's gonna lay out.
Sure.
Yeah, I could probably participate regardless in that week.
I think it would be interesting to have the point of view of the, and you mentioned this, but the DPW team. you know.
Yes, I was gonna sit down with them and just spend an hour talking
Good.
about
Yeah,
what are you looking for, what would you like to see,
The DPW what?
Team.
the staff.
the staff.
And I think the people that interact, you know, so Parks and Rec and,
Yep.
you know, sort of throwing the net a little wide, just asking the question similar, what would be the top 3 characteristics or whatever?
Oh, and we've obviously benefited tremendously from the interaction between Carroll and the state. All the qualities that go into that successful management of the state relationships are super important to us. We really benefited from it. Anything else?
Just quick comment on the union contract, fire union contract, and waiting to have another session to talk about that minimum, not having that minimum staffing language. So. That'll do me.
That's it for you. Anybody else have anything they want to raise? Ooh, get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Get a second?
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?